Okay, so you want to own an ATM. Here's the picture in your head. You buy a machine for around $2,500, you drop it in the corner of a gas station or a bar, you load it with a few $1,000s, and you set the withdrawal fee to $3. From that point forward, you basically do nothing. Every time a stranger needs cash at 11 p.m., they walk up, tap a few buttons, and $3 lands in your account. You've seen the TikToks. Buy 10 machines, place them around town, and suddenly you're the guy with semi-passive income nobody at your day job knows about. Here's the problem. That picture is almost completely wrong. The core insight that changes everything is this. The cash coming out of the machine isn't really the product you're selling. You're actually running two businesses stacked on top of each other, a tiny, heavily regulated bank vault and a real estate negotiation, and almost none of the money you make has anything to do with passive. Let's start with two transactions walking up to two different machines on the exact same night. Transaction A happens downtown at 2 p.m. at a shiny ATM built into the wall of a major bank branch. A customer walks up, inserts their own debit card from their own bank, and pulls out $300. It looks like the win. Marble floors, a six-figure building behind it, a trusted logo, a big withdrawal. This is what most people picture when they picture the ATM business, the giant, permanent, impressive machine. Transaction B happens at 11:40 p.m. outside a gas station on the edge of town, at a beat-up freestanding machine that costs $2,800 and looks like it's been there since 2011. A guy walks up, has no relationship with the bank that owns this machine, and pulls out $60. He gets hit with a $3.50 surcharge before he even sees the cash. He grumbles, taps accept anyway, and walks off with $56.50 in his pocket. Now flip it. The $300 downtown withdrawal from the bank's own customer at the bank's own machine generates the bank almost nothing, maybe 10 to 20 cents in interchange, if that, because the bank isn't allowed to surcharge its own customers. And that gleaming machine costs the bank real money every single month just to keep running. The $60 gas station withdrawal generates the independent owner roughly $1.80 to $2.50 in near pure profit the second the transaction clears. Plus, it nudges that guy to spend part of the $56.50 right there at the register on beer, cigarettes, or gas. Which transaction is actually more valuable to the person who owns the machine? It isn't close. One is a subsidized customer service expense wearing a nice suit. The other is a toll booth. Let's actually run those numbers side by side, because this is where it gets interesting. Scenario A, the bank ATM. $300 withdrawal, zero surcharge to their own customer, maybe 10 to 20 cents in interchange revenue from the card networks. Subtract the bank's cost of electricity, lease, armored car servicing, insurance, and compliance for that machine, spread across thousands of transactions a month, and that single transaction is close to a wash. It exists to keep the customer happy, not to make money.
Scenario B, the independent gas station ATM. $60 withdrawal, $3.50 surcharge. The processor takes roughly 30 to 50 cents. The host store, per their placement agreement, takes another 25 cents to $1. That leaves the owner somewhere around $1.80 to $2.50 in profit on a $2,800 machine that generates 100 to 300 of these transactions every single month. At the low end, that's $180 a month. At a strong location, $600 or more. Run that same machine for its typical 7-year lifespan, and you're looking at somewhere between $15,000 and $50,000 in lifetime profit from a single beat-up box nobody would look at twice. That gap is absurd. The boring machine is worth 5 to 10 times more than the impressive one, and almost nobody outside the industry would guess it. This is the first thing to understand about the ATM business. The cash dispensed isn't really the product. It's the doorway. What you're actually selling is convenience at the exact moment someone has the least leverage to say no. 11:40 p.m., no other machine in sight, cash-only bar tab due. It's the same psychology as a $6 bottle of water at a stadium. Nobody thinks the water is worth $6. They pay it because right now, in this exact spot, at this exact moment, there's no alternative. The ATM industry figured out decades ago that a locked box that dispenses money on demand can charge a convenience premium the way almost nothing else legally can. Because unlike a bottle of water, this product is literally cash, and people will pay a fee just to access their own money faster than the alternative. If the surcharge is the entry point, here's where the real layers of this business live. Layer 1 is the surcharge itself, and it's worth understanding exactly how it splits. The national average surcharge in the US sits at $3.22 per withdrawal as of the most recent bank rate study, on top of which the customer's own bank often tacks on another $1.64 out-of-network fee, meaning the customer is frequently paying close to $4.86 total, even though the machine owner only ever sees the $3.22 piece. After the processor's cut and the host location's negotiated share, an independent operator typically keeps somewhere between 50 and 70 cents of every surcharge dollar. That's the base layer, and it's the one every beginner focuses on.
Layer 2 is interchange, and almost nobody outside the industry has heard of it. Every time a card is used, the cardholder's own bank pays the ATM owner a small fee, usually 10 to 20 cents, completely separate from the surcharge. It's a quiet second revenue stream stacked silently on top of every single transaction, paid by an institution the customer never even thinks about. Layer 3 is the location deal itself, which functions less like a lease and more like a private negotiation you'd expect from commercial real estate. High-traffic locations, dispensaries, nightclubs, 24-hour convenience stores, can command a bigger cut of the surcharge from the operator in exchange for hosting the machine, while marginal locations get whatever terms they're offered. This is the part that actually determines whether a machine is profitable, and it has nothing to do with the machine itself. Layer 4 is the part almost no operator advertises out loud, the ancillary lift. Store owners who host ATMs routinely see a 10 to 20% boost in overall sales, because a customer holding freshly withdrawn cash tends to spend a chunk of it immediately, right there, on something impulsive. That's why a bar or a strip mall smoke shop will often accept a worse commission split just to have a machine on site. The ATM isn't the business, it's the thing that makes the actual business more profitable. Layer 5 is the newest and most dramatic version of this entire model, the crypto ATM. Where a cash machine charges $3 to $4 flat, a Bitcoin ATM charges a blended fee that averages around 16% of the transaction, meaning a $200 cash deposit might only convert into $160 to $175 worth of Bitcoin. On paper, that looks like the most profitable machine in the entire industry. In practice, it's almost the opposite. Roughly 84% of that 16% fee simply goes toward buying the actual Bitcoin at market rate. Another 5 points cover cash logistics and the host location's cut. Roughly 3 points cover hardware and operations. Another 3 points cover compliance. What's left over, the actual profit margin, is around 1.4%. Bitcoin Depot, the largest publicly traded operator in the country at over 9,000 machines, reported $573.7 million in revenue for one recent fiscal year and just $7.8 million in net income. That's a thinner margin than a grocery store, hiding behind a fee that looks like extortion on the surface.
If you're finding this breakdown useful, this is a good moment to hit subscribe. It genuinely helps the channel keep making these. But running this is far more expensive than most people assume, and this is where the ATM business starts to look less like a vending machine and more like a miniature, fully regulated bank branch. A vending machine full of chips doesn't need armored transport, a compliance officer, or fraud insurance. A machine full of cash needs all of that every single week, whether it makes money or not. First, there's the cash itself. That money sitting in the cassette isn't free inventory. It's financed capital, either your own or rented from a vault cash provider who takes a fee for the privilege. Second, there's the armored car service, which runs the route on a fixed schedule, often twice a week, regardless of how many withdrawals actually happened. Third, there's program management. Industry data from ATM total cost of ownership studies puts routine oversight, compliance checks, and vendor management at $150 to $200 per machine per month before you fixed a single thing. Fourth, there's equipment failure. A PIN pad, a card reader, or a dispenser module can run $1,000 to $10,000 per repair, and it happens on the machine schedule, not yours. Fifth, there's fraud. And sixth, there's insurance to cover all of the above, because regulators and banks assume, correctly, that something eventually goes wrong. The cruelest part is the time decay problem. An ATM in a slow location doesn't just make less money, it costs almost the same to service as a busy one. The armored car still has to show up. The compliance checklist still has to be completed. The insurance premium doesn't shrink because fewer people use the machine that month. A slow machine bleeds fixed costs against shrinking revenue, which is exactly the opposite of how people picture passive income working. And underneath all of that is the real structural tension of this business. You are simultaneously running a retail terminal that needs to feel effortless to a customer standing in front of it for 11 seconds, and a physical vault subject to nearly the same security standards as a bank branch. Almost no other small business has to run two completely different operational playbooks, customer-facing and bank vault-facing, inside the same 4-foot-tall box.
And if you think cash logistics is the complicated part, fraud is usually worse. ATM jackpotting, where criminals physically access a machine, install malware, and force it to eject cash at a rate of up to 40 bills every 30 seconds, has hit nearly 1,900 machines
machines across the U.S. since 2020, with the FBI attributing over $20 million in losses in a single recent year to organized crime rings, including dozens of people charged in connection with the Tren de Aragua network. These attacks disproportionately target standalone, rural, low-traffic machines, the exact kind of location an independent operator is most likely to own, because it's the kind of location the big chains don't bother with. Layer on top of that ordinary card skimming, which the U.S. Secret Service says accounts for hundreds of millions of dollars in losses across the industry every year, and the sophisticated operators you'll find tracking this closely aren't watching gross transaction count. They're watching cost per transaction after fraud losses and downtime, because that's the number that actually tells you whether a route is healthy. The cash is the hook. The security stack around it is where the real profit gets eaten alive. So if flat surcharges already carry decent margins, why have so many operators pushed into crypto machines and deposit-enabled ATMs instead of just running more basic cash dispensers? Because those formats do something a plain withdrawal can never do. They can't be replicated by tapping a phone. A cash surcharge machine competes directly with Venmo, Zelle, and Cash App, all of which are free. A crypto ATM, despite its razor-thin final margin, charges a blended fee 5 to 8 times higher than a cash machine, because there's currently no free 5-second alternative for turning physical cash into Bitcoin. There are roughly 30,000 crypto ATMs in the US today, against something like 450,000 traditional ATMs, under 7% of the fleet by machine count, yet that sliver of machines commands a wildly disproportionate share of fee revenue per transaction. The second wave of this same pivot is the interactive teller machine, or ITM, the deposit-enabled video-connected machines banks like NCR Atlos have been rolling into retail partnerships, including a 2025 deal to place over 4,000 machines inside 7-Eleven stores. These aren't dispensers anymore. They let a customer deposit checks, talk to a live teller by video, and manage an account entirely outside a branch. The lock-in mechanism here is structural, not manipulative. As banks close physical branches, businesses and customers in that footprint become genuinely dependent on these hybrid machines for basic banking access, which means the host location and the bank both have real incentive to keep the relationship exclusive.
Now, look at who actually controls this industry. NCR Atleos and Diebold Nixdorf together dominate the high-end hardware and managed services market, running estates of hundreds of thousands of machines with the kind of wholesale manufacturing cost advantage no independent operator can touch. Cardtronics, now folded into that same ecosystem through its all-point surcharge-free network, has locked up national distribution deals, including a multi-year agreement covering 2,000 Casey's General Stores outlets. These giants win through sheer scale, better hardware pricing, diversified risk across tens of thousands of locations, and exclusive placement contracts with the country's largest retail chains that an independent operator will simply never be offered a seat at the table for. Independent operators survive by refusing to fight that battle in the first place. A small ATM deployer isn't trying to win the 7-Eleven contract. They're building relationships with the bar owner, the smoke shop, the dispensary, the laundromat, the kind of small cash-heavy business a national chain considers too marginal to bother servicing. That kind of local trust doesn't show up on a corporate balance sheet, but it's exactly why a gas station owner will renew with the same independent operator for a decade, instead of switching to whoever undercuts them by a nickel per transaction. Now here's where the story turns, because the entire industry is being squeezed from a direction nobody in it fully controls: how Americans pay for things in the first place. Cash withdrawals across the US, UK, and Germany have declined by roughly 5.7% in recent tracking, driven by mobile wallets, contactless cards, and peer-to-peer apps. Around 30% of the US population reports not withdrawing any cash from an ATM in the past month, and Gen Z and millennials now account for nearly 45% of all digital payment volume. Total US ATM count has actually shrunk, from roughly 470,000 machines in 2019 down to around 451,500 by 2022. The hidden loss inside that decline isn't just the missing surcharge revenue. It's the ancillary retail spending that used to happen the moment someone had cash in hand, quietly disappearing along with the withdrawal itself. But operators adapted in a genuinely clever way. The average withdrawal amount has actually climbed to around $157, meaning fewer visits, but each one worth more. Cash recycling machines, which accept deposits and reuse those same bills for future withdrawals, can cut armored car runs and therefore cost by up to 30% in the right environment. The categories that can't move online, someone who's unbanked, cash-only businesses, tourists, people at 2 a.m. with no other option, became the core customer base the entire industry now quietly depends on. Regulation has reshaped this business too, and not always in the direction you'd expect. Every ATM in the country is legally required, under the Electronic Fund Transfer Act's Regulation E, to disclose its surcharge on screen before a customer completes the transaction. No hidden fees, no surprises after the fact. On the crypto side, the reckoning has been much rougher.
Massachusetts Attorney General alleged in a 2026 lawsuit that more than half of Bitcoin Depot's ATM revenue was tied to scam activity, and the company subsequently filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy that same year, deactivating its entire fleet. The surprising upside sits with whoever survives the cleanup. States are now adding fee caps and mandatory disclosure rules, which will push out the smallest, least compliant operators and consolidate transaction volume into the handful of networks with the balance sheet to absorb the compliance cost. It's the same emotional payoff of easy cash access, minus most of the fly-by-night risk that used to come attached to it. Loyalty in this business doesn't look like a punch card. It looks like network placement. Banks partner with surcharge-free networks like Allpoint or MoneyPass to give their account holders fee-free withdrawals at thousands of independently owned machines, which costs the bank a negotiated fee per transaction, but keeps that customer's checking account and every future deposit, loan application, and product cross-sell inside their institution instead of a competitor's. It's the same logic that shows up on the premium side. Banks that reimburse ATM fees on higher-tier checking accounts routinely see those members transact and deposit at multiples of what a basic free checking customer does, because the entire point was never winning today's $3 fee. It's owning the next few years of that person's banking relationship.
Looking ahead, 3 shifts are converging at once. Cash recycling and deposit-enabled machines are quietly turning ATMs into compact, unmanned replacements for closing bank branches. The crypto ATM sector is consolidating hard after Bitcoin Depot's collapse, leaving fewer, more heavily regulated operators controlling a shrinking but higher margin fleet. And biometric, cardless authentication is spreading specifically to choke off the skimming and shimming attacks that have cost the industry hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Put those 3 together, and the direction is obvious. The ATM of the future looks less like a snack machine that happens to dispense money, and more like a tiny self-service bank branch bolted to a gas station wall. A good year in this business looks like this. Your host locations stay open and renew their contracts, no machine on your route gets hit by jackpotting or skimming, cash usage in your specific market holds roughly steady instead of falling off a cliff, and your net margin across the route lands somewhere in the 8 to 10% range on gross transaction revenue after every single cost is paid. A bad year needs shockingly little to go wrong. One host location closes or gets sold and cancels your contract. One machine gets hit by a jackpotting attack, wiping out a chunk of a month's cash on hand and triggering a $1,000 plus repair bill on top of it. One state passes a surcharge cap that shaves 50 cents off every transaction across your entire route. Suddenly, that same 8 to 10% margin is down to 2% or negative because the armored car and the insurance and the compliance fees don't care how bad your month was. They bill you the same either way. And from the outside, looking at 2 identical rows of beige machines bolted to 2 identical gas station walls, you would never be able to tell which route is thriving and which one is quietly bleeding out. So here's the full picture, beginning to end. An ATM business looks from the outside like a box that prints money while you sleep. Buy the machine, plug it in, collect the fee, repeat. From the inside, it's built on a completely different foundation. A cash logistics operation wearing a vending machine's costume, running 2 incompatible systems, customer-facing convenience and bank-grade security inside the same 4-foot shell. The core insight is that the cash was never the product. The convenience premium at the moment of least leverage was always the product. And everything else, the interchange, the host commission, the ancillary retail lift, the crypto spread, is just a different shaped version of that exact same idea. If you found this breakdown useful, there's a lot more like it on this channel. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one.